This week's LC Soccer Player of the Week is Hatcher Pierce of the Lightning Bolts. Hatcher was nominated by his coach for his overall ferocity. He's a heck of a player on offense, but more importantly, he's coachable. He does things well, listens, and man, he is just a beast on the field. This week, Hatcher, you are our Player of the Week. Our Lasso Cedar Works Coach of the Week for this week is Michael Merrill of the Flames. Michael comes prepared every week. He fully engages with the refs, the kids, the league. He is outstanding in every aspect and a great model for our coaches. Thank you, Michael. You are our Coach of the Week. All right, guys, welcome to episode 21. It occurred to me as I was thinking about this episode that we are right in the middle of a bunch of stuff. Like how you have football season, basketball season, baseball season. Like, I feel like we're in stuff season because not only is college football in full swing and it is entertaining every Saturday.
Yes.
Also, election season is underway.
Well, that's entertaining, but in a far
from a different,
far more, not so good way.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, of course, our soccer season is underway. So I say all that to say,
and we're also planning for basketball.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. So stuff is right.
So we have a whole bunch. So the fact that you guys are willing to tune in and listen to what we have to say in the middle of all of this stuff, we appreciate that. So
yeah, for sure.
And can I give a shout out? Like our following is growing on social media, right? So
I mean, that's what the numbers say.
Yeah,
that's what the numbers say.
Yeah, from 4 to 6 people now follow us.
Yes, thank you, 6 people. Yeah. That's my mom. That's your wife.
Right.
That's Macy.
That's right. Yeah.
Dean doesn't even listen to it, so we can't even count him in on it.
Yeah.
And it's the guests that essentially come on.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
So
TJ watches. He's pretty faithful.
TJ does watch.
Yeah. Thank you, TJ. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
But yeah, our whole purpose, going back to our purpose, is we realize that youth sports, it's a beast. It's a beast, and it doesn't really have to be a beast. And so we want to help families. We want to help families muddle through youth sports, and not compartmentalize their faith. We want their faith to be included. And, we know that we live in a generation where, sports, breeds just kind of some anxiousness about a lot of things. Well, a lot of things breed anxiousness, but, and if I've talked to parents, specifically moms that have made the decision, not to go with the flow on what the soccer team is signing up for next season or, not to play 2 hours away, 5 days a week, right? They've made that decision, and it's a very counterculture decision, but they're making it because they know that's best for their family.
Yeah.
And so that's our hope. We want to give you guys just things to think about around the dinner table. If you're not around the dinner table, then in your car at least, as you're coming and going. And so this week, our virtue is still respect. It's in the context of how do we teach our kids to respect our opponents? We call that sportsmanship. I mean, we can. I think that we can talk about a lot of things other than sportsmanship. And sportsmanship doesn't take place just after the game. Mm-hmm. It takes place, all throughout the season. And so, Todd, one of the questions that I had for you, as we were sifting through this podcast and the things that we wanted to talk about was, let's talk about playing against an opponent, going against someone, and all of the emotions and thoughts that breeds. I'm gonna win. I'm gonna kill them. They're gonna lose. I'm gonna be better than them. I'm gonna score more baskets than them. Versus the complete opposite mentality of just let's play against yourself. Yeah. Like let's get better for you.
Right.
How have you heard that talked about as you were growing up and even in today's culture?
Yeah. Man, from the time that I was in Pee Wee football, it is it's constant the message about getting better, get better, get better. and it was said to us often, not just in Pee Wee football, but all the way through high school. If you're not getting better, then you're getting worse
Mhm.
because someone else out there is getting better, right? People are passing you if you're not getting better. So if you're not the first person in the gym, if you're not the last person to leave the weight room, if you're not doing an extra set of sprints, if you're not doing, a little bit more weight, then you're not progressing at the same rate as everybody else is. And so it becomes ingrained in you that I have to look to my right and to my left and make sure that I'm outworking that person. You
Mhm.
see it on commercials,
Mhm.
where it's almost that, I don't want to use the word guilt trip, but like, are you outworking this person? Are
Mhm.
you the gym rat?
Yeah.
So it just creates this constant fear of not being the one who's getting better every day
Or good enough.
or good
Yeah.
enough. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a great way to
Yeah.
put it.
Now, to be fair, and you may disagree with me, and if you do, that we can talk about it.
Yeah.
I do think that that God wired us. You know, I think that everyone has heard me talk a lot about the greatness of God and how when God made us in His image, He put His image inside of us, right?
Yeah.
And so He wants us to go out and to make our world a better place
Mhm.
through the love of Jesus, right?
Mhm.
He wants us to go out and to make His kingdom known, and He wants us to, for using your words, He wants us to get better at that. Like He wants us to love deeper. He wants us to serve harder,
Right.
and all those things. And that doesn't get us salvation. But going back to the sports analogy, I don't think that there's anything wrong in getting better. Like, as and I wasn't a college athlete, but let's say that I was a college athlete. Maybe in my next life, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I want to get better.
Yeah.
Like I want to get better every single day. So I don't think there's anything wrong in getting better, but I do think it's the comparison trap that, as you said, you look to your right, you look to your left, and you're comparing yourself to those guys.
Mhm.
So is there a way where like you can want to work hard? Yes, like work hard and get better. But can we get better without worrying about the guys beside us?
Yeah, and first of all, I agree wholeheartedly with you. Like, not meaning to separate athletics from other parts of life, but like, I want to be a better husband.
Exactly.
I want to be
Yeah.
a better dad.
Yep.
I want
Mom.
to I
Yep.
want to be a better employee. Like,
Mhm.
there are things I want to be better at, but the trap is, I think you use the word intrinsic,
Mhm.
right? Like, you have to think about things in terms of, if I'm looking in the mirror, what do I see?
Mhm.
Am I giving all that I can,
Mhm.
without falling into the trap of, well, I kind of have limitations compared to this guy who's 6'6" and can dunk
Mhm.
a ball, from the free
Mhm.
throw line. Like, there's limitations there. So I can't get caught in the trap of comparing myself to that guy,
Mhm.
But I do want to get better. But we have set ourselves up as a society so much so that it goes beyond competition to the
Mm.
comparison that you're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
I think about, um, particularly since we deal with youth sports all the time. My boys have played baseball for a long, long time. And so I think about Game Changer, which is an app that's been around forever and it's
Yeah.
used essentially to score baseball games. And so the way it works is typically a parent of someone on the team will keep track of live feed of the game. So if Johnny hits a single to right field, they punch in single to right field and it keeps track of it. And, that way, if parents are not able to make the game remotely, they can keep track of what's going on,
Was
right?
that the initial purpose of the app?
I'm assuming,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I think so. Um, and so, it morphs from there into, oh, by the way, we'll keep track of how many of those singles Johnny has, and we'll put that on a stat line. And so, for, a purchase, you can have the team stats.
Mm.
And so then you can see that 7-year-old Johnny has 10 at bats and only one hit, right? And
7-year-old Johnny and then stats.
yeah,
That shouldn't even be a thing.
but then you look and compare him to,
Compare.
to the next kid or every other kid on the roster. And so, these kids and more so parents get trapped into, how does my kid stack up against everybody
Yeah.
else on the roster? And so it just becomes inherent for after the game to look at, okay, how did mom of the other kid score that should have been a base
And
hit,
then
but they
that's
scored
the
it in
drama.
error.
That's where the drama takes place.
Yeah,
right? The baseball mom
exactly.
drama. Yeah.
So
yeah.
aside from the fact that it creates tension between parents because you're like, why are you scoring my kid an error when what shouldn't have been an error?
Right.
Besides all that, you add the stats into it, and then the kids are looking at that and going, man, I go to school with my friend Monday through Friday, and he's batting, 150 points higher than me, and it creates tension there. And we have just gotten so far away from, I don't want to say sandlot baseball because, yeah, there is something to be said for competition, and I don't want to underscore that, too much. But like, yes, competition is great, but at what point do you look at that and go, I've got a 7-year-old kid who is looking at his stat line and comparing himself to every other kid on that roster. And I've got parents of a 7-year-old kid that are comparing that kid to everyone else,
And we wonder why there's an anxious generation out there.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm telling you.
Yeah.
And so, I know the theme of this episode is respect, right?
Yeah.
It makes it immensely harder for these kids to respect each other when you try to explain to a 7 or 8-year-old kid that, again, little Johnny, he strikes out 9 times out of 10, right? And we're going to, not only do we recognize that with the eye test, but we're going to put that on Game Changer so you can see that out of his 10 at-bats, 9 are strikeouts. And it becomes so hard to then convince your kids to respect little Johnny because all they see are the numbers and what they visually see.
Yeah.
And so are we explaining to our kids, or are we just throwing numbers out there on Game Changer?
Right. Yeah.
And so I'll ask you, what does Matthew tell us about how we should be treating those other people?
Yeah. I mean, it's like we said last podcast, it says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Right.
And so, yeah, as you were talking, I'm just thinking like, okay, can we honestly compete without comparison? I think that you can, but you have to have the mindset of, living up to what God has placed inside of us. And that's difficult to teach young kids. You have to be extremely purposeful. I think as a parent and as a coach, I think that it would start at a place where, we taught the kids, during practices or at the games, like, hey, see the opposing players over there? You know who created them? The same person that created you. Right? Right. And, going back to respect, and just like you want to be respected by the opposing team, you need to respect them as well. And I think that, if we respect the opposing team, doesn't that create better competition?
It does. It
does.
does.
It's not a competition that's based off of a hostile situation, where you're demeaning the other team. I remember in high school, our rival was Lewisburg High School. I grew up in Franklinton, and we played them twice a year. This was basketball, and I always knew who I was going to guard. Her name was Rebecca Manquist. And she was a scrappy player, and I was too.
Yeah.
And we were genuinely friends.
Yeah.
And I respected her because I knew that she was going to play hard. And I was too.
Yeah.
But I wonder how far we've gotten away from that.
Yeah.
And we've gotten more into a mindset of, with just winning with just whatever it takes, rather than looking at your opponent and saying, listen, hey, you're good, and I'm going to respect the fact that you're good and play up to my full potential.
Right.
And, I'm just wondering how do we teach kids that in youth sports?
I mean, you have to be intentional about that. And, for those coaches that say, no, you got to push them. That's why we keep score. Of course you're comparing because, you have standings and all that. Yes, that's true. But as a Nick Saban guy, because I believe in the things that he talks about, because I think that, clearly the guy knows what he's doing, right? What does he talk about the most? He talks about the process. And he talks about, if you've seen post-game interviews, I don't care what the score was.
Mm-hmm.
Did we get better over the course of that game, or did we get worse? Were we doing the things that we have been taught to do? Or are we committing stupid penalties even though we're up 50-14? Are we still committing stupid penalties that are unforced errors basically at the end of a game?
Yeah.
We're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. He is constantly comparing his team to his team.
Yes, and that is so good.
Yeah.
That is so healthy.
Right.
Yeah.
And because you talk about getting better, being a better husband, being a better wife, whatever it is, like, are you comparing yourself to the version of yourself yesterday, or are you comparing yourself to your neighbor? Right? Because we can look on Instagram, or we can look on Facebook, or we can come to church and sit in a pew on Sunday and look across the pew and say, man, that family looks like they've got it together.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen teams that walk out on the field that are defeated before they ever even play a down because they look across and that team looks the part.
Yeah.
And they're like,
didn't you tell me a story last basketball season of Cy and how he went to that gym?
Yes.
And they were doing the warm-ups.
Yes.
And they were all, giants.
There were junior high kids dunking the ball. and Cy and his team looked down the court and they were like, wow. Like they were impressed. I was impressed. I wasn't even playing. And like before even the ball was tipped off, the game was over.
Yeah.
Never did they have a chance in that game. They were already mentally beaten. But the point is, okay, so what, right? Like, so what, they can do that. Even if we don't win this game, are we better for our experience and how we played and approached this game at the end of the fourth quarter, And not only do I think that applies in athletics, I think it applies in our life.
Right.
Like, as I move forward, my wife and I just celebrated our 23rd wedding anniversary.
Yeah.
Am I better at 23 than I was at 13? Yeah. Yeah. Now, do I have a long way to go? Yeah, I got a long way to go. But I can't look at, another marriage and say, am I doing it like that guy? Am I doing it better than that guy? No, because what my wife needs is completely different than probably what his wife needs. As a player, as especially a youth player, you don't know. You may be 4'10" now, but you might grow up to be 6'4" and have a rocket arm. You don't know. But what's important is you can't compare yourself to the kid next to you.
Yeah.
You've got to compare yourself to the version of you yesterday.
Yeah. And what keeps sticking out to me is that when we do that, when we compare ourselves to the person to the left or to the right, we are ultimately stunting our own growth.
Yeah.
Only God knows what's ahead of us. And you mentioned Nick Saban and the process and how it's all about the process. Only God knows where he wants to get us.
Yeah.
We have some biblical truths that we can follow, and grow in that way. But, if we're speaking about athletics and youth sports, when you look to the right and when you look to the left, you're taking the focus essentially off of yourself. And like you said, with your marriage analogy, God's gifted us different things with different stories.
Yeah.
And so if we're looking at the two beside us, we're not living their lives at all.
Yeah, right.
Like we're living our life.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, I'm really concerned about, just youth sports and how the concept of respecting our opponents is going down.
So I don't see. Well, let me take that back. I see things from a different perspective within even our own soccer league right now because I don't have a kid playing.
Right.
My kids are older now; they're not playing, 6-year-old soccer. But I see kids that we've had in camp or we've had in basketball and all that kind of stuff. And I'll use one little girl for example. She's playing the game on Saturday, and I'm watching her. A smile as big as and wide as the Rio Grande. Like she is just having a ball. And as I'm watching her, I was like, man, she is getting better. Like her coordination is better. She's doing a good job.
Yeah.
She almost scored a goal.
Yeah.
And and I can't help but cheer her on from the sideline, and I walk away from that. I don't know what the score is, nor do I care.
Exactly.
I walked away going, that's a win.
Same.
Same. And so it's hard for me because if I was her parent and she didn't score a goal, maybe she did really well that day. She did exactly what I saw, but she didn't score a goal. And 2 of her friends did. And she gets in the car after the game and she's disappointed because she didn't score a goal. What is my reaction to that little girl? I don't know.
Yeah.
I would like to think that I would, going back to the process thing,
Yeah.
that you look at that and go, big picture,
Yeah.
man, you are improving so much.
Yeah.
But we are so ingrained in this comparison thing that this other kid who just happened to be by the net when the ball comes and ricochets off and gets credit for the goal,
Yeah.
I mean, those things probably even out over time. But the point is, like, we cannot get so caught up in comparing ourselves that we lose track of the process and are we getting better as people?
Yeah.
And I preach to my kids all the time, like, you have to keep things in perspective. You really do. And you cannot, this is one thing my wife is really good at. You cannot compare yourself to other people. You just can't. You don't have the same background. You don't have the same abilities. Like, there's so many variables. You just can't get caught up in that.
For sure. Well, let's change the topic a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that you mentioned it at the start. We're in the middle of a voting year.
Yeah, season.
Silly season. The political season is upon us. And if you want to talk about respect, respecting your opponent.
Yeah.
And let's be clear and define, our opponents, those are air quotes, who are not, watching on YouTube, are, sometimes we view those as different political parties. Mm-hmm. So whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, how quickly things can go south in a hurry, right? Yeah. I watched the debate that happened about a week and a half ago. And, on both sides, there are a ton of, untruths, if you will, right? And then I get on Facebook. And some people, like I watched the exchange of comments, and I'm like, dude, like, you guys are friends.
Yeah.
I know the two of you, like, you're friends.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing, and why are you doing this on social media?
Yeah. Yeah.
How quickly it can turn so negative.
Do you look at those for entertainment though? The comment sections.
You know what? Honestly, I need to stop.
Yeah.
I need to stop because they're not helping me. They're not helping me.
Yeah.
But that's what happens. Like, honestly, that's
you get sucked in.
When you put something on social media, whether you think it's funny, like, so the ones that I'm talking about, they were making a joke of something that was said, right?
Yeah.
But when you make a joke of something that was said, like, you have to be ready and willing to engage in a fight of somebody who didn't think that was funny, right? Yeah. And so why do you post stuff on social media? Matthew 7:12, Jesus says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Right.
And in this political scene, in the season that we're in, if you are a Jesus follower, please be kind and please use common sense. No, we'll scratch common sense. Please go by what Jesus says. The golden rule says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Yeah.
If you want to talk politics, sit down with a person. Yeah. If you want to talk about the debate, invite them over for coffee, Yeah. I don't know that there's any need to go on social media and comment about anything. That only leads to broken relationships.
Yeah. It does. It does. And the general discourse that we have as a society now, and maybe social media has a lot to do with that, it's just broken down. I was watching, speaking of social media, I was watching a reel on the gram, as the kids call it. And
you just said the gram.
And it was about
Todd, wait, when did you get Instagram?
Whenever you put it on my phone. Like less than a year ago.
Okay.
So no, but
and
it was.
Here we are calling it the gram. Okay.
It was about like these debates from the 60s and 70s, right? And it was just little clips, and it was the people that were debating were presidential candidates, and they kept saying, "Hey, first of all, a lot of respect for my opponent," and there was a lot of that kind of thing going on. Hey, I agree with such and such, but I disagree with this, or I think that my opponent's a quality person, I just disagree with their policies. And then it flashes to the most current debate, and it's basically calling each other every name you can call them, and just
demeaning
yes.
each other just every sort
Yeah.
of way. Yeah.
And so
the level of respect from a presidential is not even there. So as a society, how
Yes.
can we expect?
What do you see? Like, is that to you a microcosm of what we are as a society now?
100%. Yeah, 100%.
My daughter, you know, she, bless her heart, she's 22, right? And
eyes wide open.
Eyes wide open. Like, but she is watching and consuming the political landscape because she's trying to figure it out. I know, right? And so, you know, she texted me the other night after the debates. I didn't watch the debates. Like, I don't want my head to explode, so I didn't watch the debates. But I do keep track of policies and things, and you know, so she texts me and she's like, "Dad, this is wrong," and she goes into all of this stuff, and I'm like, okay, and she says, but then I'm watching. I've had to delete people off my social media because they're acting crazy over this stuff, and so she's coming to the realization that true colors are coming out for some of her friends about, you know, how they treat people. And it's just amazing. And I told her, I was like, because she asked me the question, will it come back down to earth where people are able to talk and disagree with each other anymore? And I'm like, I hope so. I hope so. But I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how far this thing goes with, like you said, with social media or just the way we treat people in general. It's scary. Yeah. It's scary.
Yeah. And that goes right into what we're talking about with just respecting our opponent. You can do that in a way that still shows them value.
Yeah.
And why show them value? Because they were made by God just like you were.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you know a verse at all, you know John 3:16. For God so loved the world. That means Donald Trump and Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
You know, and their parties, regardless of where you stand, and how you treat. How you treat those on the opposite aisle is a direct reflection of Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, as we end this podcast, you know, I would just encourage all of our followers, those that are listening, to stop looking to your left and stop looking to your right, but to truly press into God. Because he is the one that made you. He has all of our days written down before one of them comes to fruition. And when is election day? November something. November. He knows what's going to happen, you know, at the beginning of November and at the end of November. And as Christians, if you're a Christ follower, we have been commissioned to go and to make disciples of Jesus. And we cannot do that without respecting those that don't see the same views as ours.
Yeah. And keep in mind, like, I will probably never meet either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Probably in my life, I'll never meet them. Do their policy implementations have an effect on my life? Yes.
Yeah.
In certain ways. But you know who I guarantee you I will meet is my neighbor who has the political sign in their yard. And so if I can't find a way to have common discourse with them that is respectful in both ways, then it doesn't matter who I'm voting for.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's it. So guys, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Yeah. You know, I speak that over myself. I want that for our kids and our soccer leagues. I want that for our coaches and for our families. And I want that for our world right now. So, yeah.
Agreed.
So that's it. We're going to end this podcast. Thanks again for tuning in on Winning with the Home Team. It's your home team that matters through the lens of Jesus and his plans for you. So if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and find some way to connect with us. So thanks for listening in. Y'all have a good day.